What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 27 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. Now, you might recall several episodes ago when I mentioned mentors. And I said normally mentors don't seek out mentees, and it's the job of the mentee to seek out mentors. Now, I want to elaborate on that just a little bit. Just because a mentor doesn't seek out a mentee doesn't mean the mentor does not let the mentee know they're available. So I'm normally on there's a group that I'm affiliated with that we talk once or twice a week, maybe 3 times even, and we do it a lot by Zoom and other means. So what happens is I ask a question on there, and I asked this question, and it was a question that's very thought provoking. I guess I never considered myself as thought provoking. Nevertheless, what happened was I got some replies from various people saying, "Hey, try this or do this," or whatever the case is. And one of those folks on there actually came back and said, "Hey, I'd like to go in a little more detail in that and go into depth, because that's a great subject. That's a great, topic that I like to cover my normal daily, everyday sort of thing." And so, that guy asked, "Hey, can I get a hold of you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we started chit chatting and we got to talking, and it turns out that, he's got a lot of information. He's got a lot of knowledge. He's got a lot of wisdom when it comes to various topics. And so, having no idea who this guy was, we get to talking. Turns out he lives thousands of miles away from me, and we've never known each other, met each other from Adam. And had he not reached out like that, and said, "I'm going to take a chance on this kid, and I'm going to try to answer his question, and then try to make myself available as a mentor." Whether or not I'm a kid, whether or not I need a mentor or I need to be a mentee is a totally different and totally off the subject sort of deal. But with that being said, I took him up on his offer, because the biggest thing that will get in your way of any kind of progression, any kind of growth, will be your own ego. You let your ego get in the way. So I said, I'm not going to let my ego get in the way, and I'm going to say, "I'm sure, let's see what you have to offer," because everybody has something to offer. And one thing I know is that if I'm asking questions about something, obviously I don't know the answer, because I don't want to be one of those guys that asks a question who then comes back and says, "I only asked this question because I want to show everybody what I know." And I am the farthest thing from that. And anybody that's listened to the show knows that I don't know everything. At least I hope I put that across, because I don't. With that being said, I get to talking with this gentleman, and we get to kind of just shoot in the breeze and realize we have a lot in common. He's a former Marine. You're former Marine, but you're never an ex-Marine. So he's a former Marine. He's a former police officer. He's gone through a bunch of stuff, and now he runs a company where he kind of consults and helps police officers and those guys who want to progress and become better, and just wants to give back. And that's the crux of our show, is those people who want to give back, especially to heroes, people that want to do things for other people. So with that in mind, I said, "Hey, would you want to be on the show at some point?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely. That'd be cool." As busy as he is, it took a little bit. He had to kind of, finagle some stuff around, because he goes all over just making sure he's helping other folks and police officers and vets and everything else. And so we have finally been able to get him on the show, and I would like to welcome to the show Mr. Jeff McGreevy. How are you, sir?
I'm doing outstanding, man. I'm fired up to be here. I love what you just said, because there's so many people that help me out along the line. And, I think it's cool to be in a position where you have a little bit of wisdom, and if you just share it with other first responders, because you can really help them avoid some pitfalls down the road.
Right. No, absolutely. I think, and I've mentioned this before, our job on this planet is to be here for other people, is to include ourselves with other people. If we're not here for others, why are we here? What are we doing? We're not just here to gain wealth, and we're not just here to make ourselves feel good, because whatever we're doing, we do it for other people, whether, we go to work to make sure we put food on the table for our kids or for our families, or, we work somewhere that helps somebody. Everything we do is for somebody else. So just that idea that somebody is going to be willing to do something for somebody else makes a huge, huge difference.
It was hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around that, because, we're in a profession where we're providing service to others. Like, we're serving our communities,
right.
Serving our country, serving our community. And then, you're also trying to take care of your family. And, we're professional police officers. Like, we got, what I try and tell people is that this is a profession. You're a professionally trained public servant. And, the better we do, the better the community does. And, but then some people can get selfish and make it about them, and make it about just, what, as much as they can get, as opposed to how can we all come up together? Like, how can we support each other and come up together so that we can all be successful, as opposed to, just me and my family,
right.
All of my brothers and sisters to rise up and be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times people just think, how do I get myself somewhere? How do I go and take care of myself? And, that was something that I learned long ago. And the way somebody put it out to me was, they just look out for number one. And so as a young kid, I'm like, who's number one? Mm-hmm. And because I'm thinking of, is that the president, or is that the head of the company, or is that, number one in their book has got to be them, because who's number one in my book, right? And so keeping that in mind, I said, I don't want to be that person that always looks out for number one. And through trial and error and growth and everything else, I can't imagine anybody has not tried to just look out for number one at some point.
I think that we all have. Like, wouldn't you think? I mean, if I was honest with myself, I would say that there was a period of time where I was just thinking about my family and maybe me, because we all want to have some level of success, and we want to move up in the ranks eventually, or you have a goal that you want to get. So, and we both are SWAT guys, and
yeah.
It's like trying to achieve that thing. Like, okay, how do I get on the team? And then once you get onto the team, how do you progress into more a different assignment, or start moving up? Mm-hmm. And then as you get a little bit, I'll just say for myself, as I got a little older, and there's some stuff that happened in my life where, I got knocked down hard, and and other people helped us get up. And so I think as terrible as some of the hard things that I went through were, it was probably some of the best things that happened to me in my life. Although I don't want to go through them again. Those bad things actually made me a better human being.
Right. So, well, I guess with that in mind, let's go way back and figure out who little Jeffy was. Who was this little guy that did stuff and either got in trouble or become the guy who he is today?
I did, man. I did. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. I lived in Melville, which is in Suffolk County, New York. And pretty early on in my life, my dad was gone. So my parents got divorced pretty early. There was some domestic violence that was happening in my family. And by the time I was in kindergarten, I lived with my grandparents. My mom, had gone back home. So me and my little brother, you figure, what do you 6 years old when you start kindergarten.
Right.
And I was living with my grandparents. And when I was about 7 years old, my dad was in a car accident, and he was a drunk driver. It's his fault. He got drunk at the bar, and the bartender was kind of like, "Hey, Billy, go sleep it off in the parking lot." And he didn't. He got in his car and he tried to drive home, and the road bent to the left, and he kept going straight, and he drove into a telephone pole and got paralyzed for the rest of his life. Wow. So my dad was pretty much out of my life from the time I was about 7. So I have very just flashbulb memories of Dad. It was just, I was young, and then he just literally was out of my life. And then when I was in 4th grade, my mom remarried and we moved to California, and I got plucked out of a really pretty stable environment. My grandparents were solid people. They owned a house, and they'd been, married for 20 some years. And my grandfather, always worked, and they paid their house off. And I, lived with grandma and grandma. My whole family was in that region. And I got moved to Southern California and taken away from my tribe. I got, basically moved in with some guy that I didn't even know. And that lasted for about 2 years. And then they got divorced, and my mom didn't want to go back home. She stayed in California. And then just trying to make it as a single mom. And so grew up basically in Southern California. After that, I did go back home and live in New York for 1 year of high school. And my mom made me come home. I wanted to stay, and she made me. She's like, "You're coming home." As I didn't want to come home. I was happy to just live with my grandparents and be around, what they had. And then came home. I played a little sports in high school. Wasn't a stellar athlete. I was good enough to make the team. I just played JV and varsity football. And but the thing I always had in my belly, in my gut, was that I wanted to join the military. And from an early age, I wanted to kind of follow in my grandfather's footsteps. My grandfather was a Marine in World War II, and I wanted to join the Marine Corps. They were the best. They were the toughest. And plus, it was where my grandfather had been.
Right. So
from a really early age, I wanted to join the Marines. And that's when I was 17, when I was in high school, I joined the Marines.
And so did your grandpa talk about it and stuff and say, "Hey, this is what I used to do," or anything, or just you saw pictures or whatever?
I saw some pictures, and he was very, he wouldn't talk to me about his experiences from the war. And I knew from other family members that, they called it shell shock at the time. Now there's, formal diagnosis of PTSD or PTSI. We're trying to call it more of an injury as opposed to a disorder. But my grandfather came home, and he wasn't the same person that he was when he went to fight against the Japanese. And he was in from 41 to 43. So he joined after Pearl Harbor. And like a lot of people did, they went to the recruiter's office. They wanted to go fight for their country. Like, we just got attacked. And he was 21 years old, and he went and volunteered and joined the Marines and served for 2 years. But even after I joined the Marines, he wouldn't talk to me about what happened.
It's weird, huh?
Which was, it was like a part of his life, I think, that he just didn't want to relive.
And I know that sort of, I've got my dad actually was in Vietnam, and he's not told me many stories about Vietnam. He told me, I think, maybe 2 or 3, and he just doesn't talk about it all the time. I mean, he'll make the jokes about politics about Vietnam, or when we were over there, it was terrible, or stuff like that, but never specific stories. And that's not the first or only situation like that. You talk about, your grandpa not wanting to talk about it or anything, but there's also I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he was talking about his great-grandfather, who his grandfather had a memory of seeing Dad coming home from war and running up to him, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home," and him saying, "Get out of my way," and just keep pushing right on through the door, Wow. And he says that's the earliest memory he has of his father, is that he would just say, "Get out of my way." And this was, either World War, if it was great-grandfather, I think in World War I. And so he kind of pushes it through, and all those things. He said it was just there's this negative thing because there was some, like you said, there's that shell shock or whatever. And I've heard people say that there actually was less PTSD, PTSI, whatever, than there is now. And because what the guys would do is they would spend 2 or 3 weeks coming home on a ship, so they'd have that time to decompress of all that.
I've heard that same thing because, it's like, it took a long time to get home. back then, and you were with your brothers. You guys, all of you that made it, were coming home together, and you spent weeks on a ship to get back home. And you're exactly right. Yeah. As opposed to somebody that, they could be in combat today, and then just fly home tomorrow, right, and be back in the community.
Yeah. And on the next day,
from, life and death yesterday to tomorrow, it's, I'm back with my wife and kids.
Right. You're at a kid's birthday party in the park, and you're like, and you're looking over your shoulder. So there's no time to decompress. And those guys, they had that opportunity to just talk and get it off their chest, and which is amazing what talking will do. It just gets all those feelings out, or whatever the case is. But I know Jocko talks about, there's a video, I don't know if it's on Netflix, on YouTube, whatever, but it's about the World War II, the guys that got shell shocked. And it's just heartbreaking seeing these guys that went through all that stuff, because the trenches were so much more brutal than anything we can consider or think about today. We wouldn't even consider what the trenches would do, or how that was. And not just because of the people you were fighting, but the filth and everything else in the trenches itself. Yeah. So anyways, you with your grandpa, but not really getting much information there. So more or less just pictures and everything like that, huh?
Yeah, it was more of I always knew he was in the Marines. He was proud of that. My family, everybody was, hey, Charlie was a Marine. And from an early, growing up, I was that kid that, you like to watch movies and watch Rambo and watch old World War II movies, or Audie Murphy, and, it was whatever. It was always interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And so you can get a little bit of a hero complex where you're like, man, God, I wish I could do some of the stuff that those guys are doing.
Right.
And there's an old commercial, and it was called the Rose Garden. They had this Marine, it was called the Rose Garden Marine. And there was it was the late 70s, maybe early 80s when this thing came out. And it was, there's a famous poster, and it's got the drill sergeant looking at this recruit in recruit training, and the caption says, "We don't promise you a rose garden." And I was like, that's for me. That's what I want,
Yeah. And did you know this all through high school, or did you say,
I did. I did. I felt like, I think a little bit of it, like I really had time to think about this stuff. I think I wanted to get away from my house. Like, as a teenager, life wasn't perfect. My mom's a nice person and everything like that, but I wanted to just get out, man. I saw joining the military as a way to grow up and start, get some freedom and go learn some stuff and get away from where I was.
Right.
And I have a letter that I just found a couple years ago, and it says, "Thank you for your interest in the United States Marine Corps, but because you're only 14 years old, you're going to have to wait a couple of years." True story.
That's too funny.
And so I joined. So my senior year, we graduate in June typically. I signed the papers in February. I was in the delayed enlistment program, so I joined. I had my mom sign the papers, and at age 17, I was enlisted.
So she signed those, and she said, and you said, "Great, I can get going, go live my life."
Great, I can get going, and I'm gonna go. Now it's like trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. And then, as I get close to graduation, I got one little problem. My GPA is at a point where I might not graduate on time, and
you're one of those guys, huh?
Yeah, I was barely getting by. I barely had enough credits, and I had a date to ship out, and I actually wasn't going to walk the line and be able to graduate. I was going to have to go to summer school and make up a class or something. So I had to go beg my English teacher to give me a D instead of an F, because she deserved it, rightfully so, was going to give me an F in the class.
Right.
And I remember going to a meeting with her, my guidance counselor, and my mother. I probably had paperwork with me. We proved to her, I joined the Marines. If I don't get a D in this class, I can't go in the military right now. And she's like, the only reason I'm going to give you a D is because I think the Marines are going to straighten you out. At least I hope they do.
So were you a problem child, or you just weren't? Were you a problem child, or just not? No,
studious? I just wasn't interested in school. I wasn't. when I played sports, I kept my GPA up because you have to have a certain GPA to be able to play.
Right. Yeah.
And then I wasn't interested in school. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I just wasn't interested. And I ditched school a lot. And, I created my own problems because I didn't pay attention to my schoolwork as much as I should have. And I just thought, man, I just can't wait to get out of here so I can go join the Marines and get on with my life.
Yeah, I unfortunately had the opposite effect. I did not do great my first couple of years of school. My last year of school, I said, I'm just going to, and I didn't take easy classes or anything like that. And I got like this, I guess my junior year, I got honor roll, and then I think I graduated with a 3.8 or 3.9, something like that GPA and all this different stuff. And I'm like, what the heck? I guess you just got to do stuff. And I didn't even think about it. And so there was no question I was going to graduate, but I had gotten to that point when I'm talking to my recruiter. He's like, how's school going? I was like, it's fine. He goes, oh, you treat it like you don't care or whatever. I said, no, I do. It's just fine. I don't, I guess I'm indifferent to it. And he goes, well, let's look at your GPA. He's like, oh, you do great. What are you talking about? Why aren't you more? And so that was never an issue for me. However, it was, if I were to go back in my early years in school, it would have been a totally different story because I did not take things seriously, and I didn't,
Yeah. Like when I look back, I didn't understand the power of education. I didn't understand, the opportunities that, could have been in front of me from doing better in school. Mm-hmm. And, so I wasted a bunch of time that I shouldn't have, but it worked out in the end. But I do wish that I would have understood and just been more engaging and more engaged with all these teachers that were trying to help us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you graduate school with your D-, and you
the D+.
Oh, D+. Oh, that's good. So you graduate school, and was it right after school you went in, or did you wait the summer? Or?
No, I graduated June. August 10th, I was in boot camp.
There you go. Nice.
On the Yellow Footprints.
So you were
scared to death.
And you're out of California, so you went to San Diego.
Went to San Diego, a Hollywood Marine.
Uh-huh. And Yellow Footprints, and so those of you that don't understand the Yellow Footprints, and I think I mentioned this with Mark Ledlow on our very first episode, and Yellow Footprints are, this is indicative and specific to the Marine Corps. When you get off your bus, you go there, and they say, get on the footprints, and there's footprints for everybody that's going to be in your platoon, and it's lined up perfectly. And so you'll know exactly how you're going to line up in formation and everything else by getting on those footprints. The other way they figure it out is by height. So if you're taller, you're obviously going to be in the front. If you're shorter, you're going to be in the back, and it just goes at that angle. But you get on those footprints, and you can look over to your right and your left, and you see exactly how you're lined up and how you're supposed to be. And you stand on those the way they are, and they're set to where your feet would be at a 45-degree angle. And so you know exactly how you're supposed to stand for the next however long you're in the Marine Corps. And every time someone talks to you or addresses you, that's how you're going to stand. So when we say the Yellow Footprints and scared to death, you get off that bus and you have no idea what's coming next. All you know is, okay, Yellow Footprints, I can do that. That's easy to do. So you get on those. And then what comes next is completely different for everybody, but it's the same fear and the same, I guess, unknown.
Yeah, and it's chaos. And I'll tell you something that happened 3 weeks before I went to boot camp. There's a very famous movie that came out in 1987 called Full Metal Jacket. And everyone's favorite part of Full Metal Jacket is the boot camp scenes in the beginning.
Right.
That movie came out 3 weeks before I went in the Marine Corps. So imagine watching that as a 17-year-old kid,
yeah.
Right? And then 3 weeks later, you're standing on those footprints, ready to go. And then it's just chaos after that. And, and you just start training and learning. And this is really the start of the next chapter of my life.
Right. Yeah. My recruiter told me to go down to Hollywood Video or Blockbuster. I don't even know if Blockbuster was still growing at the time, but Hollywood Video, and said, go rent this movie. And so I said, okay. Yeah, I'd heard about it or whatever, but never knew anything about it. And you watch it and you, okay, that's Hollywood. That's a movie. And then when you actually get there, there's almost zero difference. And it was supposed to have taken place back in the 60s, back during Vietnam.
Yeah, it was in Vietnam, yeah.
But I tell you, there's not much has changed in regards to boot camp from that movie to when I went in. I'm assuming the same thing. Obviously, I went in, I think, after you. And so you go in there and you're like, oh, this is going to be different. That was Hollywood. That is almost the most, actually, I would say that is the most accurate portrayal of boot camp I've seen in any movie.
Oh, well, without a doubt. And real boot camp's actually way worse.
Right. They're not
worse.
Nobody's getting shot. The other thing is they're not putting their hands on you. But it is way worse. They are ingenious in their punishments and in their the way they just break you down and build you back up. Mm-hmm. So you take you places that you had no idea it was possible you could go to. Right. In your mind, so much, not so much around the world or anything, but you thought everything was one way, and they show you a total different, put a different lens in front of you and say, look at it this
Absolutely.
way. So you get off the boat or off the bus, you get on the yellow footprints, scared to death. And did you have a preconceived idea of who you were, what you're going to do? And obviously they showed you something different, but the growth that you exhibited going through and becoming a Marine, was that just something you didn't necessarily consider? Or
the feeling I had when I finished was I was proud of I felt proud. Like I got the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. Mm-hmm. I am extremely proud of I felt proud. I was 18 when I graduated. I turned 18 in boot camp. Yeah. And I spent my 18th birthday in boot camp. I spent my 21st birthday in Saudi Arabia. But I was proud. I was like, I came home, you're like that skinny freaking 160-pound kid with E1 with, probably no, I think I was a slick sleeve probably when I graduated. Yeah. And it's like, you just wanted to walk around town in your uniform.
Right. Yeah. You want to show everybody, hey, look what I can do. Look what I did. Yeah.
But the Marine Corps for me in the beginning was a lot of unknowns because, I was listening to an interview with Steve Ward, who's one of the Echelon Front instructors. And one of the things we have in common, although he did 100,000 times more stuff than I ever did in my life, but we both went in open contract, and open contract is you're undesignated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Right. And I went in open contract, and I'm one of those guys that, like, when Gunnery Sergeant Hartman's reading off, the names of people's jobs, right. I found out what my job was going to be when I didn't know what it was going to be. And there was a lot of, I have no idea what I'm going to be or where I'm going to go. And then when I got out of A school and I went to, I ended up staying at Camp Pendleton, and they send you to a little shack, to where are you going to go? What unit am I going to go to on the base? Right. Camp Pendleton's like 50,000 square miles or something like that. It's this gigantic military facility down in San Diego. And I go to this shack and I have no idea where I'm going. And then they tell me, okay, you're going to the air wing. I could have gone to tanks. I could have gone to motor T. I could have gone to an infantry unit. I could have gone to all these different things. And I found out I was going to the air wing.
So fixed wing?
I went to rotary wing. So I was in a helicopter squadron, HMLA 367, Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 367.
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was to say it was Hueys and Cobras, and so they told me I was going to the wing, and then a bus came and picked a bunch of us up, and I got dropped off at the headquarters for 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, and then there was a squadron that just rotated back from Okinawa, Japan, and they needed an admin person, and I got a guy that ended up becoming one of my best friends, Sergeant Ray Garcia, picked me up and drove me over to the helicopter squadron, and I ended up being in that unit for my whole career. For 3.5 years I was in Scarface.
And that was And that was just where you wanted to be once you got in there, huh?
It ended up being, a really cool experience, being around the aircraft and getting to, fly in Hueys and just, it was a whole nother level of, like, there's so many officers in that unit because all the pilots, it's about supporting the mission is the aircraft is them being mission ready. And so the Hueys and Cobras and, so lots and lots of officers in that unit because all the pilots are officers.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad flew, like I said, he flew Hueys in Vietnam, and so all the way up into the 80s, he stayed in the reserves into the mid 80s or so. So always flying helicopters. I remember going, sitting on his lap, being and looking at the whole thing. I was super little, and I know there's a picture of me my mom has, I think, but sitting in there and with him, and I don't as I grew up and I got to remembering things, because obviously there's a point when you start remembering more things, and he started getting out. So I didn't get to be around him as much, but I do recall, sitting in there looking at all the gauges and everything. And obviously at that age, everything is so overwhelming. So, but no, that's cool. That is cool. So doing that, and you got to go anywhere, or did you stay at Camp Pendleton the whole time?
No, yeah. So I did a 6-month rotation to Okinawa, Japan, and we were on it every 18 months. We went overseas and did a pump, and the squad. There was a place. It was like every 18 months. These units were rotating over there. So I did one tour over there, and then in August of 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and 3 weeks after that, my unit was in Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield, and then eventually, Desert Storm when the war started.
Right.
So I spent 7 months. We were there in 3 weeks, and then I came home in beginning of March of 1991. So we were there for the whole thing. Our helicopters did a lot of work and blew a lot of stuff up and did lots of missions, and so that was my experience over there. And
that's good. I guess I would say that's cool. On one hand, there's some people that would say, well, it blew a bunch of stuff up. Yeah, that's what you do in war, I guess, right? So you come home.
It's supporting the infantry, and going out and finding targets and destroying armored vehicles and tanks and supporting the infantry. And, one of the most amazing things in my life at that time, and it's still one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, is the oil fields that were on fire.
Oh, I remember seeing that.
If you think about the eco-terrorism that happened, is like, when the invasion was going to come, then these guys started lighting all the oil fields on fire. And I couldn't understand what that looked like, because we weren't on the internet. We weren't watching the stuff on video. There's literally like newspapers with like a picture of something. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to fly into what's called the Alberquin oil fields. And it was the day after the ceasefire from the war. And we were going to pick up the commanding general from 1st Marine Division. And I got to be a door gunner on that mission. And we launched from Tanajib and flew north, and you just are flying into, it's in the morning, and it's getting darker and darker and darker and darker. And you get out there, and the cloud cover is so thick, this black smoke from all these oil fires. And then we're weaving in and out of these oil fires that are burning. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you could feel the heat. We had the doors open. When you got close to one, it sounded like a fire. You hear the rumbling of the fire, and there was thousands of them burning. It was an absolutely incredible thing to see, and it's a very destructive thing that happened also. But it was super incredible to have an opportunity to be on a Huey figure eighting through dozens and dozens and dozens of fires that are burning.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember seeing that in the news, and just everybody's like, "That's the end of the world." Look at and I didn't know what to think about it. I was in high school at the time, and so you see that, and you don't know what's going on, but yet right. I was still talking to recruiters and wanting to be in the military and not thinking anything of that. So that was,
yeah.
That's crazy.
So while that was going on, I was starting to think about my future. I was 20 when I went over there. I turned 20, while I was overseas in Saudi Arabia, and I had kind of made the decision that I was going to get out of the Marine Corps But I was married. I married my high school sweetheart. So my wife and I have been going out since 1986. I met her in 11th grade, and a year after we graduated from high school, we got married. And actually, in 2 weeks is our 33rd wedding anniversary.
Wow,
we've been together forever. And
congrats!
But we had a son, and I was thinking about like, okay, I didn't want to be. I was looking at a lot of the old timers that were around me that they just constantly were going overseas and away from their family. And, I told you a story about like, I didn't grow up with a father, and I wanted to be present. I didn't want to, be away for a year or just have this life of where like half of my life or whatever, or half of his life is he not going to have his dad around.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's gotta be just brutal because you start thinking about other things. Because when you sign up, I'm doing this for myself. I'm going in, I'm going to go, and you're lonely, you're by yourself. And when you, like you said, you get off that bus and you're there, all you have is you. And you might have guys that or you met along the way or whatever, but honestly, you have you, and you're writing letters to home, trying to connect and trying to keep this tether with your past and stuff like that. When they're trying to sever that so you can become, more, or they're trying to change your way of thinking to think about the team and the mission and everything else you're going to be doing. And when you hear everybody, they say they go to war, they're not fighting for, necessarily glory, or they're not fighting for patriotism and all this. They're fighting for the guy next to them. So at some point you learn to separate yourself from your individual, who you are, this past, the child that you were, and then now you're fighting and you're going for these guys that are next to you, and you're becoming something else. And so when those guys are there, they're there, but you still have this tether now, and not in a bad way. It's not like a ball and chain like people talk about, but it's a tether holding you to back in the United States, back your wife and your son and all these things. It's hard to start being able to say, I'm only going to do this, when you have all these other branches now that are pulling you.
Right. And, some responsibility too of, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And I wanted to serve my country, and I had my opportunity to do that. And then I started thinking about, well, is there a way I can serve my community? Like, and that's when the idea of trying to become a police officer happened. And I started applying before I got out, and I was fortunate enough to have a 29-year career as a police officer right after that. So I pretty much, I kind of say that I served for 33 years because I did 4 from the time I was 17, I was either in the Marine Corps or I was a police officer.
Right. So you said that you wanted to serve. Now, where did that come from? Where did this desire to serve? So you served in the military, serve your country, and then you wanted to keep serving. Where did that thought, that feeling, that desire come from?
I always considered myself a patriotic person. So I wanted to make my grandfather proud. Mm-hmm. And that planted the seed for military service. All of his friends, I hung around with, I should say, like, just imagine being around your grandparents. And then, right. When there's a party or when it's a holiday and there's a barbecue at people's houses, I got schlepped along with them. We were around their friends. And so all of their friends, they were all World War II veterans. They were that era of pretty much every one of the men. Mm-hmm. They were either in the Navy, in the Marines, in the Army. Yeah. All of them. And so you kind of grow up around those people. My other grandfather, my father's father, also was in the service. He died when I was 3 weeks old. So I never got to, know him at all. Right. But, all these people that I was growing up around, they all were veterans, right? And so you're like, okay, wow, those guys, they were in the military. And I just had a patriotic spirit from early on in my life. And right. And I still do today. I'm that guy that, man, when I see an American flag, it makes me proud.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. My grandparents were the same way. They would go things, they would have people over, and it was weird because people partied different back then. Mm-hmm. We're having a party tonight. We there was a point where we lived with my grandparents, and they said we're having a party. So their idea of a party was making sure there was food set out. They dressed up. Most of the time, my grandpa would wear like a Hawaiian shirt sort of thing, but they would they would get their slacks on, and they would make sure the record player was cleared off so they could open it up and, have Benny Goodman or something like that playing, and this is early 80s. And I remember that. And there's this, everybody had that same thing where everybody was a patriot, and there was no question about that. There was no question about and if you had a disagreement on politics, it was minimal, because the main thing was the United States is who we are. And we're having a good time doing this. The biggest controversy back then was usually your sports team. There wasn't other junk, but I know exactly what you mean, because even on my dad's parents, my grandparents they served, they were in the military, and everybody I knew that was an adult had been in the military. So when I started meeting people that were not in the military, I thought, well, why didn't you? What's the deal? But it's because that's how I grew up. That's all I knew. So, when you're a kid, you play with G.I. Joe and all this other stuff, and that's what and that's what was expected. At least that's what I thought was expected. So,
right. And then that whole, like I told you, like the watching old movies, watching war movies, and even though some of them were cheesy, but just, the level of movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s compared to what you see on the movie screens today. But, they kind of help make you feel patriotic about these guys that served. And just from a young age, I just felt like that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going. And I still feel that way today. Like I'm proud that I did what I did, because it changed my life.
Sure.
Without a doubt, it changed my life.
Well, I can only imagine the other people in which your life-changing events help change other people's lives. Because if you're doing that stuff, if you're in the Marines and then you become a police officer, you don't have, there's no way you're not connecting with somebody else on some other level as well, to where you're either motivating them, or you're having some kind of, say in their life, or, doing something. So just serving other people makes a huge difference. So with that, you get from the military, you said, I'm going to go become a police officer, and you were able to get right in as soon as you left the Marines?
I did, man. I'm the luckiest bastard in the world, man. I started applying before I got out. So, 1991, we were coming off a win. And, still a great time to be a veteran in America. But, in 1991, it was a good time to be a veteran. And so I started applying to local police department. I had made the decision, okay, I'm going to try and get out. Now, understand the caveat in the back of my mind is that if I don't get hired, I'm going to re-enlist, because, my time was coming up. I'm like, I have a wife. My son was like 9-10 months old.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming up on a year old. I'm like, I'm not going to be unemployed. I will re-enlist, and I'll go. And I had a couple of ideas of things that I wanted to go and try and do. And so I started applying, and, the old days of, it was the Sunday paper. You go to the classifieds, and there were these little boxes, and it had these announcements for police departments that were accepting applications.
Right.
And so it's like, you get the phone numbers and you call the city and you just start this process. And I started with 4 local, I live in Ventura County, California. Mm-hmm. And the city that I grew up in was having a hiring freeze. So they were not even accepting applications at the time, but there was 4 other local departments I applied to. And I ended up getting hired by the Simi Valley Police Department, which is got famous for the Rodney King trial was held. The officer's trial was held at the Simi Valley Courthouse. And, I came in right at after the Rodney King era,
Mm-hmm.
but about 400 people applied for the job. I came in 4th, and they hired 6 people. And I was in, man. So 3 weeks out of the Marine Corps, I was standing in a new formation in the police academy.
There you go.
Like, it doesn't happen like that.
No, no. So you said there are 400 people. And so I'm assuming when you took the test, because you had to test for it. And I've talked to other guys on here and stuff, and they've all, we've talked about that. But standing room only, or it's a big giant gymnasium and just tables everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And just people in there, you have no idea who they are. And you're like, how am I going to get, am I enough of a, the cream to rise to the top, am I that good?
Yeah.
And so getting number 4, that's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. I came out 4th, and I didn't know what I was doing. okay, like nobody in my family was a police officer. I didn't have a mentor that was help guiding me through. I didn't know what I was like and also as a grown man that, I'd say that if you want to be a cop, you need to learn about the benefits that the city has and what's the pension plan like and has their health insurance and has morale and has this and has that. Right. I was just trying to get a job.
Right.
I was just trying to become a police officer somewhere. And I got a great start. I ended up getting hired by a great city. I worked at that department for 5.5 years. And then I ended up coming back home to the town that I grew up in. And I spent the 23.5 years in the town in Oxnard, where I was from. Mm-hmm. But I'm extremely grateful for that, city and that opportunity. But yeah, man, 3 weeks out of the Marine Corps, I'm in the police academy.
That's, yeah, like you said, that does not happen. And because normally let's say you get through all that stuff, it takes a little bit longer to get through background and it takes longer to get through all the testing process and all this different stuff. So 3 weeks, that is quick.
Yeah. Well, I was applying for, so, it's like a 6-month process, but there's so many things that can go wrong. Becoming a police officer, firefighter, it's a very fragile process. You can get dropped real easy, or you can not do well enough on something. And it doesn't mean that the other people wouldn't be great policemen. Somebody else scored higher than you, or some things are, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, when people are interviewing somebody could just have a certain feeling and they give you an 8 instead of a 10,
right?
Yeah. And that could be the difference between you getting the job and not getting the job. And, but it's a very fragile process. And then there's so many things that can go wrong in the academy. Then you got to pass field training. Then you have to finish your probation. It's really a 1.5-year process to where, you're not written in pencil anymore.
Right. And and that's just because you get through normally. Police departments have a 1.5-year probation as it is. Once you get hired, then you have that 1.5 years. So you go through the academy and you go through post academy and you go through field training, and then you're actually solo and they're keeping an eye on you. And during that time, you're normally an at-will employee or whatever, So you get through, but like you said, there's that portion before that. So it's just because you get through one doesn't mean you're done. It's okay, good. That's behind me. Yes, that's behind you. And now you have this next hurdle you have to go over.
Yeah.
And
it actually gets harder. Each step actually gets more and more difficult.
Right.
Because you get through the training, and you got to get through the field training, which is challenging for a lot of people. And then now you're all by yourself in the police car and you need to do the job that you've been studying to do for the last year. You got to do it by yourself.
And everybody's
make
watching
good decisions.
You. Yeah. And if you're that kind of guy that makes excuses or you do whatever, you just get a bad reputation. And this is where reputation starts becoming a thing. And you think, oh, so reputation, big deal. Who cares what people think of me? In a profession like that, or the military or anything else, your reputation makes a big difference, because if you are that guy that people can't count on, or you're that guy that people see as lazy and they are always having to pick up your slack, or, whatever the case is, there's a huge issue now that you're now a liability, not just because of, a financial liability for the department, but you're a liability as far as, are you going to be safe? Are you somebody that I can count on to protect me? Or, because we could very potentially be going into a deadly situation. And if you're too busy because you're known as let's say a flirt, and you're flirting with, somebody instead of actually doing your job, or you're too lazy
paying attention
to do your job. Now we have problems. And not only are you affecting me, you're affecting the department, you're affecting my family who would like to see me come home. Your reputation is huge, and you don't want to be that guy that nobody wants to work with.
Right. And then there's another dynamic to that, is that if you make a mistake or you do something, is having the humility to go, okay, I screwed up and I'm going to work my way through this. And because you can fix that reputation, and you can fix the way people view you, because we all make mistakes, or especially, you get into this career really young, and you're still growing. You're still growing up, as a man or as a woman, and your life's experience is not going to be the same when you started as 5 years into this job.
Right.
It's complete. You have a completely different perspective about things. And you can fix it, but you have to be willing to train. You have to be willing to work hard. You have to be willing to have some humility and go, okay, and look inward and go, this is happening not because it's someone else's fault. It's not Ken's fault that this is happening. Actually, how much of this is my fault, and what do I do to fix it so I can get through this and just, get on with my career? But
right. People don't think about it. Everybody think, well, I don't want to admit it's my fault, because then, to be honest with you, when you admit that it's your fault, or you take ownership of it, or you lose your ego in the situation, whatever it is, people actually look at you, with more grace, and they're like, okay. And then especially if you come forward with, like you said, that idea of, okay, how do I fix it? And it could be your own thing. And you say, gosh, dang it, I can't believe I did that. And now I got to fix this. That's one thing. If it's on the grand scale and it's not just you that it affects, and now you got to go to your boss, say, yeah, that's my fault. I'm going to do it, but fix it by doing this. Now, sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes you can't fix it. And you just have to say, in the future, this is how I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so those big things, when you get looked at like that, people start seeing you have that attitude. That makes a huge difference. That makes a bigger difference than if you were to say, oh, that was my fault. That was Joe over there. Joe, he did X, Y, Z, and that's why we had this problem.
And as a leader, when you get up into a leadership position, you need to welcome that person that comes to you and says, hey, Sarge, like, I just made a mistake, and I just want to let you know what happened. And this is what I'm going to do to make sure that never happens again. Or if someone comes to you, like they actually don't know what the answer is and what they should do, for someone to say, I made a mistake, I need a little help, and let them take some constructive criticism, right? And then you'd also not drop the hammer on them, because, people make mistakes, and you have the ability to kind of help guide them on how they deal with that. Because you can get them in a lot of trouble, or you can go, hey, okay, cool, man, I'm going to help you work through this. Thanks for bringing this to my attention. Anything I can do to help you, let's do it. Let's talk a little bit about what happened. Let me give you a little input on how I'm seeing this. And plus, if you've had an experience where you've been through it before, and a lot of sergeants and lieutenants, they've been doing this for 20 years, and you've only been doing it for 5. I've actually seen this 25 times, and let me tell you about, some ways that I can try and help you avoid this happening again. Right.
And but as us as young guys and whatever, in our 20s and our, whatever, we don't want to sit there and admit that we did anything. We want to show, hey, we know everything. And I noticed this was a trend, because my son would do this when he was little. He would do this whole thing where see these movies where the guy walks in and he's this savant, and he's able to just out of nowhere be able to do whatever, superhero stuff. And somebody's like, oh my gosh, how did he's never done this before? You must be great. Well, and he gets labeled the one, or whatever. And so that's what these movies are all focused on. And so he would expect that he would be able to go do this stuff and then walk through. And then when he didn't succeed right away, he'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. And I think that we have a problem with folks today, young guys today, girls as well, where they say, if I don't get it on the first try, I'm a failure. And yeah, well, that's okay. We can be failures. We're allowed to fail. That's what part of growth and part of life is. I can't count how many times I've failed, and I've failed big time sometimes. And I'm assuming the same thing with you as a human being.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, many, many times. Yeah.
We all fail. And so if we sit there and say, I can't believe I failed, and then quit after that first failure, at what point, how do you know you're ever succeeding if you have never failed?
Right. And, early on in my career, I had a lot of success and things go your way. And then when you have a couple things happen where maybe you didn't get an assignment, or you didn't get what you wanted, or you think you can look at it two ways. You can go, okay, this is a growth opportunity for me to do better. Or what I've seen people do is they become very disgruntled, and they become, if they didn't get a detective assignment, or they didn't make it onto the SWAT team or something, this person that was, really happy-go-lucky, and now they become a malcontent, where they just become now they're against the department, or
Right.
their work products, they were all in it if you would have given them the job that they wanted, or the assignment, or I want to be a field training officer or whatever. Some people that take humility and go, okay, let me look at myself. How can I do a little bit better in the interview? Mm-hmm. Is there something that I did that people are not over yet? Did I do something stupid that I'm actually still, having to work through? Because like you were talking earlier about your reputation and about, and because there's big things about maturity and your reputation and your ability to work with others, especially when you're going like into a team environment or a small team environment, and being able to grow from that stuff. And I had a couple of experiences where, I had to eat some humble pie, and luckily I had learned from other people is that although you could be really disappointed in that, what happened is that you take a step back and go, okay, I need to look at myself, at what do I need to do to make some changes? Because as you get more advanced in your career also, what you don't understand is that people are going to be looking at the way that you handle the situation. When you get a setback, they know you just took a setback, right? And you're not going to be happy about it, because when there's one sergeant position and 5 people put in for it, 4 people are going to probably be sour grapes because they didn't get promoted, right? And it's the way that you handle the situation. Especially, I had a situation where I got skipped for a promotion that I had been told I was going to get, and that knocked my ego down. I was embarrassed. I was kind of ashamed of it. I felt like I let my family down, because when you get a promotion, you get a raise and you get more responsibility, and there's other, training opportunities and leadership opportunities, because you have leadership capital just based on who you are. And it doesn't matter how many stripes are on your sleeve, or, if you have stars and bars on your collar. There's also the positional authority where you feel like you're ready to move up to the next step.
Right.
And I had a thing that happened where, the chief made a decision to skip me, and that really hurt. And I really had to step back and go, all right, you need to take stock of what's happening right now. They're watching you to see how you handle this. Yeah. Are you going to just come out of this even better than you were before? Or are you going to start going backwards? And, and they'll see that. They'll see that in your attitude and your work performance and your commitment to the organization, all those things. They're going to be watching you, because guess what? Next year, when that promotion thing comes about, they're going to remember what you did a year ago and how you handled that setback.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I put in for a promotional position, and they, my intent going into it was, I just want to show them that I have an interest in moving forward. I didn't, and my whole intention was not to actually get it necessarily.
Go through the process, see what it's like, and get some experience interviewing.
And I thought that studying. If one of those guys that has a higher rank than me, and he's able to go and he gets it, maybe that would open up his position. Maybe I'll score high enough to get his. If not, I learned what it's like to go through that and everything else. And you go into a situation where you don't expect too much, and you just go into it to do it. Let's do it, and let's do the best you can with no expectation that anybody owes you anything, that you're going to go and you're going to blow these guys out of the water. Because the majority of the time, if you're doing that, and like you said, if there's one position and 5 guys, it means, well, there's a good chance those other 4 guys, and there's an even better chance they're your friends. So why do you want ill towards your friends? Why do you want just so you can, like we said before, just look out for number 1? Sure, everybody wants to do the best, and just go do the best you can. And if you're doing the best you can with the intention of supporting or developing the team and completing the mission, whatever that mission is, that should be your goal, not to get in there so I can, have some authority and show everybody how things are and let them know there's a new sheriff in town and all this different stuff, And that was my intent anyways. So I totally get what you're saying, where, what you do is your not only what you do in the actual action, but your reply to whatever reply you get, how you react to that. That makes a huge difference. And that really shows your character and shows, because a lot of times people are going to like, and they're going to want to be around the person who puts others first and is humble more than they're going to want to be around the guy that's so self-absorbed.
Yeah. And, listening to, and I'm going back to like myself when I got skipped for the promotion, is that listening to some people that are trying to give you some good advice about maybe how to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget one of my friends that says, hey dude, they're going to be watching you after this. And it just reminded me of the importance, because it's how you handle the situation, because you'll be super happy if you get the promotion. And then how do you handle challenges? Like, how do you handle setbacks? How do you handle getting knocked down a little bit?
Right.
Because your ego, when you feel that you're ready, and, when you were describing the thing of like, hey, you were kind of saying, hey, I'm going to throw my name in the hat. I want to go through the process.
Right.
Like you said, no expectation of really, coming out number one. It'll be great if I get promoted, but I'm really just trying to do this for experience, or just to do it. So you've got like a lower stress level too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And some people actually do better that way because they're more relaxed in interviews, or because I've definitely seen that stuff before, where guys are they're like, I don't care. And then they come out first on the list. Right.
Yep.
But you got the guy that's been trying to do it for 5 years, just can't make it to the top.
He's not sleeping the night before.
Getting through that setback. Yeah. Getting through that setback and going, do an honest assessment of you, so that when you come back in this, you show them like why you should be a good candidate for that position that you're going for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's go back to, you get through field training, you get through the academy and all that stuff like that. And did your military experience and did that help you get through any of that, or was it just a totally different ball game?
Getting through, like, my military experience gave me the life's experience that I had, because I didn't go to college until I barely graduated from high school. And so, you fast forward 4 years to this 21-year-old who's going through the police academy, and I turned 22 in the academy. So now I'm 22 years old, and I have a little bit of experience, but I've had a lot of stress inoculation. I've gone through the Marine Corps boot camp. I've lived in a very structured life. I've worked I understand a rank system, and I respect authority, and I respect, the leadership right. So I've moved from one structured lifestyle into another structured lifestyle. Uh-huh. And so the wearing the uniform and all that stuff just felt very natural to me, because that's what my life has been. I wear a uniform. And so now I'm wearing a different uniform now. And so that stuff helped me. But then there's always, the job is so complex and so complicated that, you're just learning as you go, and you have to just get life experience. There's things that you do where you're like, I didn't really do that good of a job on that one, but you learn, because it's going to help make you better. Nobody died. Right. It's like, there's just stuff when you're a new police officer, there's stuff that you just don't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Right. When I became a supervisor, and now I'm the guy with 23 years on the job, and this guy has 2 years on the job. Right. That, that there's things that they just don't know. They just haven't been exposed to it.
Right.
And how do you just help them navigate through that as best they can, so they make the best possible decision that they can.
Yep. I remember I had a trainer, and he would say, you just go with your gut on this one. And I was like, I have no idea what my gut would say. My gut doesn't even know what it would say. The other side of it was, he was like, no, you got somebody in the passenger seat, asking questions, just be asking questions. And I would sit there and think, I have no idea what questions to ask. So like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And how do you get through things that you just don't know? You don't even know what to ask. You don't know where to go with it. Am I supposed to be doing this? You don't even realize. So you're just doing whatever. And so No, that absolutely makes sense, because as a young guy, you don't even think about how you're going to get through this next thing, or what your next step is going to be. You just know that, okay, I've got to figure this thing out somehow, figure out what it is, and then I'm going to have to go write a report at some point. Maybe I arrest somebody, I don't know, or do I, whatever. And then who do I got to call on this one? Do I tell somebody this, or do I just go with it myself? And so the questions remain. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's why you have the trainer, which is good. But then when you get solo, sometimes you just forget.
Yeah. One of the, as you were just talking, I don't know why this just popped in my head, but one of the most challenging things that I had to do when I was in field training, I think it was in second phase, which is your second month of training.
Yeah.
Is I had to do field sobriety tests on an active duty Marine.
Oh man.
And I just got out of the Marine Corps 7 months, maybe 8 months before.
Yeah.
And this young Marine I'm 22. He's probably around my age, if not younger. And he did something, and somebody stopped him for whatever in DUI. And then, I'm the training car. I'm the rookie. So what do? They call for the rookies to come over to do, FST, field sobriety test. Call for the because training. You got to learn how to do this stuff. So that's what happens. You start taking calls for, the veteranos because give it to the rookie. You got to learn how to do it. And I go there, and it's like this dude's a active duty Marine, and I'm like in my training. I'm like, are you serious? We're gonna arrest this guy? Like, yeah. And I'm sitting there in my mind going, I can't believe that I have to do this right now.
Right.
Yeah. And it was, I didn't feel good about it, but I had to do my job.
Right.
I didn't have a choice. I wasn't in control. I had a training officer and the senior officers around there. Like, they're the ones that are stirring the drink on this one, not me, but I have to do this. And so I'm like, I'm going to treat this guy the best that I can. And just, that's when I guess I've never really thought about that in a long time until I don't know why it popped into my head, but it's like you had to detach a little bit and go, all right, so this isn't my fault either. This is your fault, dude.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever you did to get the attention of these guys, that's actually your fault, not my fault. It was tough, man.
Yep. No, did you think that, that could have been me at any moment?
Yeah. You're like, man, what if that was me? Or I'm thinking like, what's going to happen to this dude? Like if he gets, drunk driving, what's going to happen? You're going to get busted down to private. I don't know what rank he was,
right.
Corporal, Lance Corporal or something. And like, you're going to probably going to catch some discipline over this from your command. And typically what they do is, you lose rank or lose money. So this guy's been working for a couple of years and he made a big mistake. And, there's a possibility that, he's going to get knocked back.
Right.
In his rank and have to pay a bunch of money.
And that's what you were saying before, where you did this, man, and I didn't do it. I just have a job to do. And I think not everybody, I think a lot of people forget that, especially nowadays. Everybody's saying, the cops are doing this and the cops are doing, there's laws on the books that say that this is what it is. We get hired to uphold those laws, to hold people accountable or to make arrests on those or whatever the case is. Nevertheless, we bring their name before the judge, and then the judge, the court, to do what they do. And that's basically what we're supposed to do. And so everybody says, oh, you ruined my life, or this sort of stuff, or the cops are going out of their way to put people in prison. They're doing their job, and we're not ruining your life. We're just doing you guys can look the other way. But then I'm not doing my job. I mean, what if I look the other way when there's a school shooting and I'm the closest one? Should I look the other way then? What's the difference between the guy that's driving drunk that could take out a family, or the kid that has a gun and has a death wish and wants to go to a school? There's either way, there's tragedy that's going to happen. And for me to say I'm just going to look the other way, who am I to look the other way? I have a responsibility.
There's areas that you have latitude because, there's a spirit of the law and the letter of the law, right? And there's some things where some people don't understand, like the police officer actually has no choice in the matter, and that if he doesn't follow the procedure, or there's some laws that say you shall,
right?
The police officer shall. Well, if you don't, you just either broke the law or you violated a department policy, and you're sticking your neck out to where you could, lose your job or get suspended or face some kind of disciplinary action. But then there's gray areas where you have a lot of latitude. And, for some people, there's times where, you broke the law and you're getting cited or you're getting arrested. And it's just, that's just the way it is. They don't really care what your story is.
Mm-hmm.
I got to do my job. We're getting along. And then you have situations where you have some latitude and goes like, hey, do I really need to arrest this person? Is there another way I can handle this? Can I call their parents, or can we have somebody come pick them up? And you see this stuff with fights and disturbances and things like, I can arrest you right now. Absolutely. I can put handcuffs on you and take you to jail. Mm-hmm. But is that really the best way to handle the scenario? Can we just diffuse the situation and get people on their way? And it just depends on what you think. And there's 10 different ways to solve a problem.
Right.
An arrest is just one option 7, but there's a bunch of other options,
right.
And you try and go through those things to resolve it. And because you're not, when people get arrested, they get a black mark on their record, and it could follow them down the road and affect their life.
Right. And, you have that, like you said, you have that latitude, you have that ability to say, okay, this kid, let's say it's a kid, 17, 18, he wants to go in the military, and yet you're going to jam him up with an MIP or something like that. Can you can write him you can take him to jail for it, you can write him a ticket, whatever the case is, whatever the law says, you have the ability to do. But, or is there another way you can handle this? Is there, however, whatever the case may be, you can look at things, what is going to be the best interest. And that's why I think we need to have people doing this job. And you can't have robots, and you can't have, just, it has to be this way. You can't. There's not this whole RoboCop thing where the law says this and you must follow the letter of the law. You have to follow that spirit, like you said, most of the time. Yeah,
especially when you're problem solving. We were using this drunk driving example. I mean, look, something happened that, whether he had a little fender bender or he just got pulled over for, maybe he weaved or something. Somebody saw something that he did. But let's go to a community problem where you've got if you're trying to help with a particular neighborhood or a commercial area where you're patrolling, well, you start looking at all these little problems because you're trying to help with the overall quality of life that people are experiencing in an area.
Right.
And that could be, and that same thing, that can go both ways. It's because you could be doing a little bit more directed enforcement, in an area where you're just we're looking for people to stop at night between this time and this time because we're having a burglary problem, or we got a gang problem, or we've got a robbery problem, or we just
Keep an eye out for part 2 of episode 27 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. We'll finish our conversation with Jeff McGreevy. But until then, be safe, and we are clear.